Dave Canales says that Bryce Young is sending him and the rest of the Panthers team a message after the last two games. Is that enough of a message for Bryce to not only be the quarterback for the rest of the season, but also in 2025? I'll answer that question among other listener questions in this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays, like today, for the entirety of the regular season, I'll be right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council. A follow is not required. Just get those questions in following every Carolina Panthers game. And there is not a game on Sunday. So after all the NFL games are played on Sunday, or maybe even after Monday when Dave Canales speaks to the media again, send in questions and I'll answer them here next Wednesday on the show. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Panthers are on a 2-game winning streak. The first time since 2022, they have won consecutive games. The first time since 2021, they have won consecutive games in consecutive weeks on their NFL schedule. The vibes are immaculate after winning that game in overtime against the Giants in Munich. What an experience that game was. What an experience last week was personally for me, for the team, and everyone who made the trip abroad, whether it's from the U.S., from the U.K., or we're just right there living in Germany and making a trip to go check out the Panthers, getting that win on Sunday in overtime. And that has a lot of people now wondering, has Bryce Young done enough on Sunday against the Giants, the week prior to that, and the win against the Saints, and to a lesser extent, but more so looking at the garbage time play against the Denver Broncos? Has he done enough to retake the starting job here in Carolina moving forward for the rest of the season? But that's not the only question being asked on today's show. Some people are asking, is it time to say that Bryce will be the quarterback again in 2025? Edison has the first question on the mailbag today, saying Bryce is showing improvement after being benched. I know it's a performance-based league, but do you think the organization and people are being too hard on him after Bryce barely having a chance last year of how bad the O-line was and the lack of weapons? I thought this year would be more like his actual rookie year, having a chance behind a good offensive line, not making any excuses for him because it hasn't been pretty at the start of the season. Just curious what you think. Well, Edison, you've been listening. You should know kind of how I feel about the situation that Bryce Young was put in last year, which was hellacious. And had Austin Corbett been healthy the entire season and had Brady Christensen been healthy the entire season, that O-line is not as bad as it was. But it was kind of a square peg into a round hole as it went from more of a downhill blocking scheme to a zone blocking scheme where Bradley Bozeman, the center at the time last year, admitted that didn't feel like he felt fit into that system. And they were making those guys play into a scheme that didn't benefit them. So the coaches got to understand, which is a failure of Thomas Brown, who, by the way, is now the play caller up there in Chicago. So congrats to them for getting a second chance. I thought it was going to take him years after what happened last year, the debacle with this offense, for him to get another opportunity as a play caller. And he's getting it up there in Chicago, where it has been a debacle for the Bears. But we're not worried about the Bears and what Thomas Brown's going to do in Chicago, unless some people are going to say, oh, we should have kept him, which I know will probably happen if there's any sort of success. But sticking with Carolina, the offensive line was banged up. The weapons outside of Adam Thielen were terrible. The run game was never what's been at points of times this season, especially on Sunday and that win against New York. The situation was not great. Now, Bryce Young was terrible the first 2 weeks of the season. I still felt like, although he had been bad, you got to stick with him. He did not have a chance last year. Now with this offensive line that we've seen play really well, he had a chance. He had better weapons this season I didn't love the idea of pulling the plug after 2 weeks. Now, we saw how well Andy Dalton played against the Raiders game, and it was hard to argue that he was the right player for the Panthers in that position at that point in time based off of, well, his play, the play calling by Canales, and the overall energy from the team who believed far more in Andy Dalton as their leader at quarterback one than they did in Bryce Young after those first 2 starts. So it's not excuses. There are reasons why Bryce Young did not play well last year, aside from he was a rookie and he had his own failings and own limitations that are still here today through 21 starts now in the NFL. So I think it's not necessarily his rookie year. He did gain valuable snaps last year. Should he have sat? Hindsight's 2020, probably. But you can't wash away everything that happened last year. He's better for it, I think. Now, he looked worse for it when the big season began, but now he looks better for it, the benching, than you would have thought when the time happened there after week 2 for them to bench Bryce. So, yeah, he's showing some improvement. Has it been enough for the Panthers to say this is our guy and people being too hard on him? The Panthers gave up a ton. He was the number 1 overall pick. It is, as you mentioned, a results-based league. If the results aren't there, then rightfully so, people are going to be upset and are going to be critical of that player. Just comes with the territory. Chuck is asking about Bryce Young and what the Panthers may do in the future with Bryce, saying, should the Panthers hold on to Bryce after this season, regardless of performance, and not trade him and draft a quarterback in the later rounds of the 2025 draft to learn from Bryce and maybe compete with him in his year 3? I'm just saying sometimes teaching brings the best out of a student when they are on the hot seat. Well, if the Panthers want to retain Bryce Young next season, I don't think drafting a quarterback in the later rounds is going to be something that's going to push him next year to improve in 2025. This quarterback class is not great. Carson Beck, if you watch him again on Saturday, terrible. Quinn Ewers looks like he's finally healthy. I'm still not a huge fan of Quinn Ewers. Jackson Dart banged up in that game. Think he's solid, but I'm not a fan of Jackson Dart. Shedeur Sanders, I believe, is the best quarterback in this class. I just don't see this as being a quarterback class where if you're Carolina and this thing bottoms out the rest of the season, and they don't actually have that upward turn like we're looking at right now, and they're sitting there with a top 2 pick, a quarterback in this draft class, no, I'm good when it comes to that. And I'm good on also drafting anybody. If anything, if they're going to have the same staff, which it looks like they're going to next year, just have Jack Plummer back there and continue to develop him as they have been doing already, opposed to going and getting a quarterback who probably isn't really much better, if better at all, than Jack Plummer when you're looking at it. So, no, that's not an idea for me. As far as regardless of performance, should they keep him, if Bryce plays the rest of the year and goes back to looking like he did week 1 and week 2, he's not going to be on the roster. The performance obviously has to matter in this conversation of will he be the quarterback again in 2025. But it's far too early for me to answer this question. 5 starts this season, 2 of them were terrible. The third one was okay. The last 2 have been good. The one against the Saints better than the one we saw against the Giants. He's not played well enough for him to earn that spot next year. Now you can look at the organization as a whole and see how they failed him a year ago, and maybe that led to his failures early on this season. You can look at just overall in the NFL, the lack of patience for this next class of quarterbacks to really develop into the guys that they hope they will be when they drafted them. And by cutting ties after 2 years doesn't make a lot of sense for Carolina and for a lot of other organizations. I would argue that it probably doesn't, but just understand the reality of how the NFL's work nowadays. He may not get another opportunity next season if things do not work out. If anything, if he plays well enough, like he has the last couple of weeks, even if the passing numbers are not eye-popping, the Panthers got to bring in a veteran backup who's younger than Andy Dalton, more athletic than Andy Dalton, to push Bryce Young and to be the guy they can go to if they need to do that again next season if Bryce struggles. My hope is Bryce plays well for the final 7 weeks of the season. The Panthers win a couple more games, and they can build onto that heading into 2025 with Bryce assuredly being their starter that year, which would be a huge year for him and the organization, as after that 3rd season, they would have to figure out whether to exercise that 5th-year option, which right now, we don't even know if he's going to be the quarterback next week against Kansas City. I think he should be. I think he will be, but we'll see. Aaron has another question about Bryce. So what's more important, winning and building Bryce's confidence or trying to secure a draft spot? Well, I would think that if you trade away Christian McCaffrey to get 4 picks from San Francisco so you could use some of that capital to get a quarterback, then you use a couple of those draft picks to move up with Chicago. You also give up your first-round pick in 2024, your second-round pick in 2025, and, oh yeah, DJ Moore. I would think that the player you give all of that up for, you would want to see him win and have confidence built for the remaining 7 games of the season. That's just me. Maybe not you, but that's just me. I would think that the investment the Panthers made in Bryce Young would be something that they would like to see actually play out in a positive way, opposed to, let's just lose games and get a high draft pick in a draft class where it's not like you're going to take another quarterback. I don't know who the top guy is. I guess Travis Hunter, who is outstanding, by the way. But other than that, I'm not paying attention to that. It's November 13th. I'm focused on the NFL season and the college football season. I'm not focused on the draft because, well, I hate how people are focused on something that's going to happen months away. That's not actual football games being played. Like, these are the fun times, not the, oh man, this guy could really help us in the 5th round. Jesus Christ, I hate it so much, man. I hate it so much. But looking at it, the Panthers right now are 9th in the NFL draft order, according to tankathon.com, our favorite website here on Locked On Panthers. There are 11 teams in the NFL with 2 or 3 wins. 11. Last week, there were 9. One of the guys I work with over at MRN with NASCAR was saying how, the Panthers should be losing games. Okay, well, they're in pretty hot competition when it comes to losing games because there's a lot of teams, 11 in the NFL, that have lost a decent amount of games this year that are all battling, I put that in quotes, for the top spot in the NFL draft. I don't think the Panthers are one of those teams after the last 2 weeks who are battling for that spot. And nobody wants to be there. Everyone wants to win. The Panthers are trying to win games. Guys who are here right now are trying to earn their spot here in Carolina next year or elsewhere. Players don't tank. Staffs don't tank. That's not a thing. Now, teams can be very bad and effectively end up tanking. And if the Giants go out there and bench Daniel Jones because of the injury settlement, which the NFLPA has got to step in if that happens again, because the Broncos did it with Russell Wilson, the Giants would do it with him, and they can say, oh, we're going to go to Drew Lock, as if like Drew Lock is an answer to their problems, which at this point in time, why not do it? But if it has anything to do with the injury settlement, just a random takeout here, they got to step in and stop that, because that's just taking away for the integrity of the game if they're doing some crazy stuff like that. But the Panthers are a team right now who should be trying to build on what they have the last couple of weeks, what they have with Bryce and what they're having now with a healthier defense. As you get back Jordan Fuller, as you get back DJ Wonnum, you're going to get back some other players as well. Like, they should be trying to win and build not only Bryce's confidence, but the confidence in the defensive unit and everybody else on this team, as this is going to be the coaching staff, at least offensively, again next year. And if the defense is able to turn things around, Gerald Rivera's under contract again. And if they play solid ball the remaining 7 games and they're healthy, I would expect it to be the DC again next season. So why would you not want to try to win and build upon that heading into 2025? And by the way, speaking of the draft, remember we talked about that trade, Diontae Johnson to the Ravens a couple weeks ago. The Panthers have now moved up 23 spots. Back then, it didn't look like they were going to move up that many spots because they were sitting there top of the draft. Now 23 spots. That's not insignificant when you look at that pick swap from the 6th to the 5th round they made with the Baltimore Ravens. Would have loved to gotten more, obviously, but 23 spots better than the 10, 15 it looked like it was going to be just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, winning and building confidence in Bryce Young, who you gave up the world for, I think that's a little bit more important than securing a draft pick. Come on, man. Why? That's why the draft is the worst, because of those mentalities that people have in the middle of a season. Not talking about, we won, great, let's keep winning. Oh, do we want to win, or would we rather lose and then try to draft somebody who may actually not be any good? Or they could be, but it's no guarantee. It drives me insane. Will always drive me insane, and why I hate the draft. All right, let's take a quick pause. We'll come back. We'll answer more questions about someone who actually wants the Panthers to win games and wondering, is the NFC South up for grabs? Maybe a stretch, but we'll talk about it here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I'm going to enjoy my Sunday on the couch watching these games. Got Steelers, Ravens, Bills, Chiefs. Going to probably put some money down on that on FanDuel. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You can now win up 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Oh, yes. Also, North Carolina. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season when players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions to real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's get back to it. The weekly Wednesday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. A bye week for the Panthers, now sitting at 3-7 after back-to-back wins against the Saints and against the Giants in overtime over in Munich on Sunday. Jake is asking about the turnaround we're seeing here with the franchise. Are we seeing the start of a turnaround for this franchise? Can we win 2 to 3 more games and show a sense of direction to get excited about? Is the NFC South up for grabs? Now, as far as the first question, are we starting to see a turnaround? It's possible. Dave Canales was talking about foundations being built. They have built a foundation in the run game. They rewarded Chuba Hubbard for his hard work and his buy-in to this new coaching staff with a contract that could potentially pay him $37 million, which is great for Chuba. He's going to get 15 guaranteed over the next 2 seasons for sure, but he could be here for the next 4 years, and he could be with Jonathan Brooks. And I had somebody ask me on Twitter, who I guess going to throw this in the mailbag as well, about are we going to see the next D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart smash and dash situation? We'll probably need to wait to see Jonathan Brooks after actually play before we have that conversation. Maybe, but let's wait to see if he plays. Well, he's going to play. Let's wait to see how he plays. And 7 games rest of the way. It can be a little bit early, I think. I don't think we're going to see that, but possibly next year you see it. Either way, they had the foundation there. They got to figure out the pass game defensively, the defense. As they were talking, Josie Jewell was saying this, Ashawn Robinson, some guys in the locker room are getting that chemistry together. They're getting healthier, and they're now understanding each other more, and they can play better. So we're seeing at least, I think, a turnaround here for the second half of the season with this team getting healthier and some guys really being bought into what Dave Canales and the staff wants out of them. As far as can they win 2 to 3 more games rest of the season to show a sense of direction to get excited about? Well, Kansas City on Sunday, probably not going to be, or next Sunday, probably not going to be a win. Maybe it will be. I'm sure someone will talk themselves into that being a victory, especially if KC goes out there and loses on the road to Buffalo. Tampa Bay, they have lost 4 straight. That maybe it's even 5 straight, but 4 straight, I'm pretty sure. That's a game at home. Probably feel pretty good about if Mike Evans doesn't play, and we know Chris Godwin is out for the rest of the season. At Philadelphia, don't really see that one happening, but the Eagles have played with their food a couple of times this season. Dallas, Dak's now out for the rest of the year. That feels like a game that the Panthers, dare I say, should win. Arizona at home, they're leading the NFC West. Who thought that was going to be the case heading to the season? That's going to be a team really battling for an NFC wildcard spot, if not just a division title. And that's a game that they could ill afford to lose. I would think the Carolina with 3 weeks remaining or 2 weeks remaining after that. So game, I think Carolina can be competitive in at Tampa, at Atlanta to end the season. I see Tampa, I see Dallas, I see Arizona, I see Tampa, I see Atlanta as 5 games where I really feel like this team can be really competitive and potentially come out on top. They're not going to win all 5 of those, I don't believe. If they do, hell, that's the 8-9 record, and who knows where that puts you in the NFC wildcard race. But let's not get ahead of ourselves as far as Jake asking, too, is the NFC South up for grabs? The Falcons have a 3-game lead with 7 games left to play. For the Panthers to realistically be able to overcome them, they would have to, of course, beat Atlanta in Week 18 on the road in Atlanta, and that puts that lead, already 2 games right then and there. We're just looking at it from now. And then you would think outside of the other games, the 6 remaining, I mean, man, they have to be kind of perfect. They would have to go, I think, 6-1 down the stretch. And Atlanta would have to come back to them, which would you be surprised by that? They would have to beat Atlanta, and then maybe they could lose one other game outside of that. But I don't think it's up for grabs. With Tampa Bay falling off, with the Saints somehow beating the Falcons, which that makes you feel like maybe Carolina can do it as well. I don't think it's up for grabs. I felt going into the season, we talked about it with the other NFC South locked on host. I had them winning the division. Then I had Tampa. Then I thought New Orleans and Carolina. And right now it's kind of right there. I don't know who is ahead of who as far as the 2, 3, and 7 teams being the Panthers and the Saints. But I don't think it's up for grabs. But as far as getting excited for next year, if they can go 3-4 the rest of the way, that would mean going 5-4 in the final 9 games of the season. I think, and also with Bryce, it really comes down to the Bryce, and does he show you enough? Then that can get you really excited, I would think, for next season. So, I mean, 4-3 would be better than 3-4, but getting to those 6 wins, I really think would be great. Getting to 7 would be awesome as well. Just 6 or 7 wins, and Bryce Young being the guy next year in 2025, that really gets you excited. Because if he's not, then you have a hard time knowing who's going to be the quarterback, as who knows how that will return in the offseason coming up in March. Will, asking about the wide receiver development now in Carolina. Do you think having Diontae Johnson on the team as wide receiver 1 for the first part of the year slowed down the progression of the rookies we had behind him? They're playing great right now, but wonder where they'd be if he hadn't been here and if it seemed like we tried to force him targets to keep him happy at times. I don't know if that slowed down their development. I think if anything, like Legette being banged up throughout the offseason, that slowed down his development. Jalen Coker playing really with the scout team, like the 3s and 4s, probably slowed down his development. And JT Sanders, you can't say anything. I mean, he's not a wide receiver. You can't talk about his development being slowed, as Ian Thomas and Tommy Trimble have been banged up the entire year, and he's gotten those opportunities to start and finally got his first touchdown. I think he's been playing fairly well the last couple of weeks, but they brought Diontae Johnson to be that guy for them. And it didn't really work out aside from 3 games. And there's some issues there in the locker room where he didn't necessarily, I guess, fit what they want culturally here in Carolina. Not saying he's a bad guy, just didn't fit. And they moved on from him, and they really wanted to move on from him based off of what the trade details were a couple of weeks ago. But I think the rookies at wide receiver, and we'll include Sanders in here, have actually been playing pretty well of late, especially considering like what your expectations would be for this rookie class going into the year. I don't think anyone had any high expectations. I mean, I guess because people are always going to talk themselves into UDFAs. I'm realistically, like Jalen Coker, did you think that at this point in the season he'd be like the number 2 wide receiver for Carolina? Probably not. JT Sanders has already had a better year as a receiving tight end than anybody since Greg Olsen left. And I had this sent to me by one of our listeners here on Locked On Panthers. Legette, who has 284 yards receiving, Jalen Coker has 263, and Jatavion Sanders has 253, are ranked 8th, 9th, and 10th amongst rookie pass catchers in the NFL. Another team has that many in the top 10. The Panthers have 3 guys right now in the top 10 when it comes to rookie receiving numbers. That is really encouraging when you think about the future of this offense. And for Sanders, he's second amongst tight ends. I felt like he was the second best tight end in this draft class, only behind Brock Bowers, who is, doing Brock Bowers things now here in the NFL. So that is awesome. Now, Legette being 8th among receivers, having a couple guys that were below him, like Ladd McConkey and Keon Coleman. Don't love that as much, but still, you can see that he's going to be a solid player for Carolina. Will he be that alpha, that number 1? Only time will tell. But right now, that's a really encouraging start for those guys. Another question, I guess, I don't know. Well, I'll answer it. Also from Will, he says, also, as far as not naming a starter, I get the whole gamesmanship thing, but what value do you think Canales may believe Dalton can provide at this point into a 3-7 season? That Bryce can't decide the obvious answer of experience. I think Bryce has improved a lot, but also don't like the idea of a guy losing his spot to injury. Yeah, that's never ideal, because Dave was sitting here saying that Andy Dalton gave the Panthers best chance to win, and then the next day he gets in that accident, and now 3 weeks later, he won't really answer that question. after being emphatic about Andy was their guy and that they were going to stick with Andy. Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. If you didn't listen to the show on Tuesday, kind of going back and looking at the game, but also listening to his press conference where he was talking about the offense and how the running game at least has been where they want it to be. Passing, there's still room for improvement. And I went over the passing stats so far from Bryce and from Andy, and Andy has more passing yards, has more passing touchdowns. They have both started 5 games so far this season. The Panthers 2-3 with Bryce, 1-4 with Andy. Maybe the passing game is going to be the reason why they decide to go back to Andy Dalton if they do go back to Andy Dalton. So we'll see. I think it should be Bryce the rest of the way. But if he does go back to Andy, it's going to be because of what they want in the passing game and how they believe he gives them more in that facet. So we'll see how it works out. A couple more questions here on the show. I'm going to take a quick pause and come back and answer the rest of those here on Locked On Panthers. Hey, Panther fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back, and they have added an amazing new game mode I need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a new head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring coaching staff, now you also get to call offensive plays during games as well. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiation system. So this fun and realistic game just got a whole lot better. If you already have it installed, be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it, download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I love it, and I know you will too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want, when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans like you. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM, start your dynasty today. All right, couple more questions here on this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Now going over to Bo, who says, going into the bye, where do you see Coach Canales taking the identity of this team? Clearly, they are great at running the ball. Yet at one point, we saw 3 straight screen attempts. LOL. Now that Bryce is getting his confidence back, at what point does Coach Canales just give him the playbook and let it rip? I would hope. I mean, against Kansas City, that's the best run defense in the league. So it's going to be very hard for Carolina to lean on that run game. Now, that would be awesome if they're able to do it. And I do have a question of who is going to be on the offensive line to start that game. We know Robert Hunt, as of course, if healthy, Robert Hunt will be there at right guard. Let me knock on wood. I'm not trying to jinx anything, but Robert Hunt starting right guard, starting right tackle, Taylor Moton, starting left guard, Damian Lewis. When Ike Ekwonu comes back, does Brady Christensen go back at center, or does Cade Mays keep that job? That's something I'm interested in, and we'll talk a little bit more later on this week on the show as I have 7 questions I want to see, or at least 7 questions for the final 7 games of the season that I will discuss on Friday's show. But we'll see what happens, and that's kind of goes back to what I just had talked about on the other side and what we talked about on the show yesterday. Does Dave go back to Andy Dalton because he feels like he's a better option for them as far as opening up the pass game? They're getting Adam Thielen back, and you cannot discount how discredit, whatever. You can't ignore how important that will be for this team, as he was activated from IR on Tuesday afternoon. So that's huge for Carolina to get him back, to have confidence built in Legette and in Coker and in JT Sanders. You get an experienced wide receiver. Right now, they don't have that other than David Moore, and that should help the pass game, I would think. Now, will it be Bryce getting to rip it, or will it be Andy? We'll find out, I guess, next Wednesday. So the identity, they're going to want to continue to run the ball. Defensively, they can keep getting some turnovers. Like they get 3 turnovers a game like they did against New York. They're going to have a chance to win a lot of games, and that would be obviously great for just talking about the final 7 games and trying to maybe even talk ourselves into this team knocking on the door of the wild card. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, identity to be running the ball, but I think he's going to want to open up more with the passing game if he has the personnel to do it with Thielen, and if he feels like he has a quarterback to do it, whether it be Andy or Bryce. Final question coming from Kurt kind of goes back to the game on Sunday. Being there live, was the playing service actually as bad in Germany as it appeared on TV? Bryce slipped a couple of times. Chuba and Clowney had the injury scares due to slipping. And although they never showed the replay, assuming the Miles injury was field related too, I never saw the replay of the Miles injury. It looked like he kind of just got like, guy fell on the back of his leg. That's what it looked like. I don't know whether it was a hip drop or what. That's just what it looked like to me. Going to the sideline, those things happen all the time to runners. So that's what it looked like to me from my vantage point in the stadium. And I was down there on the field before. I wasn't like on the grass on the actual playing surface, but I was right there, pitch side. And I looked fine to me. I don't know. It looked like the exact same grass they use for the Bayern Munich game. I know in Europe they use sometimes a hybrid kind of turf than what we use here in the US, where I think it's like usually it's 100% natural grass. It's hard to tell. I did see chunks come up when Bryce slipped a couple times early on in that game, and I didn't feel like anyone else really slipped. Like Chuba made some pretty hard cuts and he didn't fall down. So I don't know. I don't think it was bad surface. I didn't ask any of the guys if they felt like it was a bad surface. And Dave Canales, who was there a couple years ago with the Seahawks game against Tampa, where there were a lot of complaints about the surface, didn't sound like he was concerned about it at all either, or at least didn't want to make an excuse about it. So no, didn't feel like to me it was that bad. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back next Wednesday to answer your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Julian Council if you so choose. And I'll answer your questions on the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I will talk to y'all on Thursday, where I'm going to do a midseason stock report. Yeah, we played 10 games. There's no even number anymore, but it's a bye week. So bye week stock report, looking at the offense, looking at the defense, and even taking a lens into the rookie class. So talking about that on tomorrow's show. So tune in, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.